Being a leftist isn't fun. I'm sure that earns an eye roll from a lot of you because this feels like a given. As a leftist, you've got to actually care about things, remember a bunch of statistics and factoids, add the newest hot button issue to your lukewarm laundry list of political concerns, and police yourself to the point that problematic becomes synonymous with panopticon. Sure, there's lots of homework that comes with being a leftist, but where are the fun bits? Political movements aren't simply a bunch of policies and activists. They're heavily reliant on a cultural aspect. This is most effective when said aspect is so enticing and fun that the people flocking to it don't consciously realize that what they're doing is technically political. A great example of this is the EDM scene. Every now and then you'll get someone complaining about how it feels like a bunch of woke liberals are suddenly coming out of the woodwork unprompted, and such people complaining of this are basically outing themselves as unknowing participants of left-wing culture. Electronic music has its roots in developments like krautrock and musique concrete. Krautrock rode on the coattails of left-wing student protests happening in 1960s West Germany and positioned itself as a countercultural reaction to traditionalist Schlager music that felt representative of previously Nazi-controlled Germany. Musique concrete came around a little earlier in the 1950s and initially developed in post-World War II France and later Germany in societies that were still living in the shadows of their fascist past. Both developments in music aimed to create counterculture artistic movements to further distance themselves from their country's fascist past and the music that represented it. Leading into the 80s and 90s, club music was a continuation of the work that krautrock and musique concrete had laid down. I'd go as far as to argue that the club and rave scenes worldwide were a left-wing cultural phenomenon because they were both progressive about drug use and embraced the left-wing electronic music movement that led up to that point. Some were more overt about this message than others, as there were clubs for queer people and other minorities that served as a safe haven from everyday bigotry. Some people might come to good conclusions about harm reduction and the importance of social gatherings because they're leftists, but others might come to those conclusions because they just want to have fun during their weekends off from work and feel safe knowing the eckies they're taking at the club aren't laced. From our perspective, it's hard to look at young right-wing edgelords and understand why the ideologies of fascism, techno-feudalism, and eugenics are in vogue with young people these days. Plenty of leftists have tried to pin it on pipelines, but I think a lot of them do it more for the aspect of stupid fun than they do the politics, just like many clubbers and ravers in the 80s and 90s. They feel special and as if they're against the grain because their jokes upset most people. It gives them the impression that they're sticking it to the man, which confuses a lot of leftists because the man, in their definition, is systemic issues like classism and racism. But to the culture of contrarians, it's whatever feels like it pisses off the most people. To get at what I mean here, I need to briefly explain the history of image boards. One of the first prominent image boards was the Futaba channel, or 2chan. It was popular in Japan because it gave young people a break from the otherwise strict culture of decorum in their offline lives. Christopher Poole, or Moot, took notice of this and decided to make his own English variation of it called 4chan, the joke being that it was better because 2 plus 2chan equals 4chan. Of course, it became similarly popular in America, in part because the booming internet was full of college-aged men, and this image board became an online manifestation of frat bro culture, which was fitting for 4chan's main demographic. Frat bro culture is an accurate characterization of 4chan back then, and to an extent nowadays as well. They'd pull stunts like pools closed due to AIDS, and their contrarianism was aimed at whatever they felt would piss off the most people at the time. In the early 2000s, that meant fervently religious, anti-communist paleocons. 4chan's earlier days were left-leaning not because the lot of them were leftists, although I'm sure some of them later drank that Kool-Aid, but because it was fun to piss off paleocons that were scared of socialism and Satanism. Nowadays, the world is immensely less racist, sexist, and homophobic than it was in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. And in the analysis of your average Joe, the average person is now a wussy liberal. Especially after Gamergate, the new easy lolcow for contrarians is no longer the naive paleocon, but now the over-emotional liberal. Feminists who throw fits, communist neats, those types. Contrarians and edgelords like easy targets, and now that neoliberalism has supplanted paleoconservatism in most Western countries, they're the new target. Being a leftist was a lot more fun before this shift happened. It didn't matter if you believed in the actual politics or not, contributing to left-leaning culture by going to raves, getting involved in the punk scene, or trolling people on the internet was a fun way for young people to spend their time. Leftists these days stress the importance of educating others and having tough conversations, but one function of socializing that helps take down people's walls about this stuff are cultural movements. It's a great way to get people involved and later teach them the politics of the cultural movements they're already participating in later down the road when they inevitably become curious. Just like the early days of 4chan, I don't think most young right-wing edgelords give a damn about the politics of what they're doing, but some eventually get curious and fall down that pipeline. These days, because of how heavy-handed algorithms are, you don't have to wait for someone to become curious anymore. Social media platforms are good at calculating that if you like X, you'll probably like Y. And as edgy memes shifted from left to right-wing undertones, this made it easy to recommend right-wing podcasters and figureheads to the young people participating in modern meme culture. There's a reason why figureheads like PJW would repeat the slogan, "Conservatism is the new counterculture," over and over, and why others like Nick Fuentes and Gavin McInnes are up to dumb antics in between their sloppy political rants. Most leftists interpret this as a tactic to cover up their stochastic terrorism with a veneer of unseriousness, but I also see it as a way to reel in young people who want engaging and sensationalist content. Sometimes the best way to cater to new people isn't only to support policies that work in their favor, but to do things that act as a conversation piece with their friends. Let's be real for a second here. Most people on the internet have heard about Nick Fuentes and Gavin McInnes because of their silly moments, then because of their politics. When leftists talk about these two, it's because they're sharing the concerning things they say, but when most people are talking about them, it's because of Fuentes' gay catboy date or the time McInnes sodomized himself on camera. These are the kinds of things that young people are going to talk about with their friends. Online leftists don't seem to realize that the efficacy of online content isn't solely dependent on how well, let alone responsibly, it's put together, but rather about getting people to say, "Did you see when Figurehead did sensationalism?" It's the Jackass effect. Young people share content when it works as a fun talking point with friends, and this effect still carries on into today with highly sensationalist creators like the Paul brothers and Mr. Beast. While many online figureheads absolutely struggle with figuring out where the line is, I'd like to think that the few figureheads on the left handle it pretty well, namely Harris Brewis from H-Bomber and John Oliver from Last Week Tonight. They're much better at keeping their shenanigans on topic compared to right-wing sensationalism, and they're much more creative in these antics. Like Fuentes and McInnes, Brewis and Oliver have gone viral for their shenanigans, and I've seen some people share their outrageous sound bites regardless of their political involvement or whether they cared about the topic at hand. Basically put, the left can recreate this sensationalism effect to gain an audience and in a higher brow flavor of humor to boot. Unfortunately, what we lack is a hold on the edgier side of the internet, which, as much as the left wishes it would go away, is a demographic that the PG-13 humor of Brewis and Oliver isn't going to reach. Vosh and Chapo Trap House used to have some kind of grasp on this slice of the social market, but have since toned it down with their content now leaning more into doomerism. So, while I don't have figureheads in this instance to conveniently point to, I think my general criticism is that the online left doesn't take as much risk, and, especially in the eyes of your average Joe, this makes them look too goody two-shoes to position themselves as rebellious or counterculture. Plenty of right-wing shitposters get banned on social media, and while I don't think they need to be as unhinged, left-leaning shitposters are few and far between. I doubt the absence of this behavior is due to lack of appeal. Left-leaning accounts that posture themselves more aggressively on Blue Sky seem beloved by people on the platform. This seems to be part of a larger, short-lived movement on the internet called Dark Woke, where some accounts and figureheads on the left got more comfortable being a little meaner and aggressive. This strategy seems to be working pretty well for Mamdani's campaign for mayor in New York, as he's willing to make jabs and teases at his opponent, Andrew Cuomo, that many establishment politicians would be too lazy to concoct. The public is tired of pushover liberals who lack strong convictions or, in the case of Chuck Schumer, do nothing more than write strongly worded letters. They want politicians who are actually going to fight for them, and this is another reason why the right has had success in certain parts of America and Europe. They're good at giving the impression that they're fighting hard against the deep state and government corruption, even though they do little of actual substance. This isn't to say that we should copy the tactics of the right to the word. Rather, what I'm suggesting here is that leftists should step out of their comfort zone and practice anarchist calisthenics. Many are afraid to question or break unjust laws due to fear, even if those laws are completely immoral, such as bans on protesting. Similarly, in social spaces, a lot of leftists are afraid of breaking unwritten rules of decorum that they're vastly miscalculating. I'll admit, I'm guilty of this too. While I don't live anywhere as deeply red as Florida, I'm afraid of displaying pride bumper stickers on my car because some chud might key me, or being more outwardly political because I'm worried about triggering a heated argument. However, I should test those theories before complying in advance and assuming the worst, when that might all just be in my head. Fear is the key factor that's getting a lot of people to subjugate themselves by complying in advance, and I think it's worthwhile to at least test the waters. Rosa Luxemburg famously wrote, "Those who do not move do not notice their chains," but I would add that you also do not know what freedoms you have until you exercise them. With all of this aside, what would be the left's equivalent to political pranks? I gave the example of pools closed due to AIDS earlier, but I think I need to mention a few other 4chan pranks before I lay out what a leftist equivalent would look like. One 4chan prank that garnered a lot of attention was their defacement of Shia LaBeouf's artistic endeavor, He Will Not Divide Us. It's a simple message he put on a flag in response to Trump's first presidency, which was live-streamed for anyone to see. If I was really pretentious, and agreed to call this milquetoast demonstration art in the first place, one could consider it performance art. However, 4chan did more of the performing than the art itself. They took it as a challenge to find where the flag was, and while it was moved to increasingly secure or remote locations, 4chan was hot on its heels. When they inevitably found the flag to take it down, which, mind you, was every single time, it made the bit all the more hilarious. Technically, this is a jab at LaBeouf's left-leaning message, but like a lot of other cultural movements, I guarantee you many people were just in it for the gag. Around the same time, 4chan was running another gag in which they tried to turn the silliest things into reported hate symbols. This was mostly a jab at sloppy liberal media outlets who were too trigger-happy to find the next alt-right dog whistle for their latest scoop. They attempted, with varied success, to turn the polar bear emoji and milk into recognized hate symbols. The majority of the time, this was only reported on by small independent outlets, but the joke still landed the same. And like the He Will Not Divide Us kerfuffle, I'm sure plenty of the participants weren't entirely aware of the political commentary at hand with this prank. Some anons on 4chan love to brag that their crowning meme achievement was using their weaponized autism to get Trump elected for his first term, but I think they're giving themselves too much credit. It's much more likely that they'd be the victims of foreign bot farms or big tech's morally dubious social engineering schemes than being the kingpins of such operations themselves. However, this myth gives us an interesting starting point from which to derive some left-leaning cultural spectacles. Yes, it would be pretty funny if you could meme so hard that you affected the results of a presidential election, but why stop there? Why not meme so hard you crash the global stock market? Left-leaning artists have begun taking up arms against generative AI with poison pilling. This is the act of modifying your artwork in such a way that it not only doesn't work as training data, but actively harms the ability of the AI model stealing it to function properly. This is expanding into more mediums than just digital art. Ben Jordan is making an equivalent for audio so AI music websites can't steal it for training data, and Fami is making a poison-pilling tool for YouTube captions so AI video summarizers fail. I should stress here that AI is the current driving force of the stock market. The Magnificent Seven, a handful of tech companies which are heavily invested in AI, are responsible for the majority of the growth in market benchmarks like the S&P 500. So I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that if people were behind AI poison pilling as much as 4chaners were with some of their pranks, there's a chance you could tank every boomer's retirement portfolio for the lulz. This is just one idea, but what's important is that the left cultivates a space where people can feel free to experiment and come up with these ideas in the first place. It's hypocritical to be intensely policing each other only to then turn around and pretend your politics are inviting to the commoner. You've got to meet them halfway, not just with memes, but also on the understanding that not everyone is going to agree with every one of your political eccentricities. I'd go as far as to say that some leftists treat political homogeny like Nazis treat race. They act like inviting someone who's rough around the edges dilutes the rest of the movement, so we have to be really picky about who we let in so they don't corrupt the rest of us. Bullshit. As long as there's a fist in the face of a Nazi, I couldn't care less about whether that fist is connected to a person who agrees with everyone's opinions on Vosh or whether people can say retard. I know I joked in the introduction that the left is at a point where problematic has become synonymous with panopticon, but I personally know some leftists whose anxieties about what they say or do on the internet, even unrelated to politics, are to the point of actual mental illness. It genuinely plays into Foucault's definition of panopticon, where everyone becomes their own worst prison guard. This isn't to say that we have to make excuses for Zizek's off-color comments about trans or black people, or pretend that figures like Anna Kasparian and Russell Brand are batting for the same team as us after they became grifters. Rather, my point here is that effective political movements, and decent communities in general, shouldn't be so quick to write people off and disown them. As much as many leftists are jealous of how good the right is at posing a unified front, we don't seem to take that self-critique to heart enough to do something about it on our side of the aisle. Borderline paranoia is the worst kind of environment for cultivating memes and an energetic culture that grasps people's attention and gets them interested in collaborating with us. Bernie Sanders has stressed for years now that effective political movements have energy behind them, and it's because more than just being correct, you need to be fun and exciting. The last thing I want to see is the minority of chronically online, chronically political leftists representing the movement as a whole. The kinds of people who spend so much time on the internet that it has genuinely destroyed their ability to discern what a real problem is and predict what is on the mind of your average working class person. Nobody cares about your clanker discourse, or whether you think spelling folks with an X is ableist against people learning English, or your constant concern trolling towards anyone you want to feel superior to. These are all wastes of time when the left already performs really well on bread and butter issues that we all agree on anyways. While this contrived discourse is not only incredibly removed from the average voter's priorities, it's bad for the terminally online leftists who participate in it too. I get the vibe with some of them that they think taking things seriously means being in a constant state of panic and argument, to the point that if you aren't constantly panicking, they accuse you of not taking the current state of affairs seriously. The way I see it, however, is that if you really were to take something seriously, you'd act on it. You'd call your representatives, you'd donate to civil rights NGOs, and you'd take care of your fellow allies. If I'm panicking all the time, I lack the ability to take things seriously by acting. The left inactivates itself by not only wasting their time on political nothing burgers, but also on a constant state of distress that keeps them from meaningful action. The people who participate in this nonsense aren't doing enough with their lives to realize how much of a waste this is. They genuinely don't value their time enough to do other things and branch out into new spaces. Sometimes you're more effective as a leftist by being a diverse mind in an otherwise right-wing dominated hobby, like sports, than competing to be the loudest, angriest one in an already dense leftist space. Besides, if you want to be mad at someone, go tell your representatives to eat your entire ass. Seriously, these people make salaries generous enough to never have the right to wake up and say, I don't get paid enough to do this shit. As much as some leftists don't want to hear it, people like having fun, including in politics. They don't like pretentious, selective asshats, and they certainly don't want to join movements where they feel like they're stepping on eggshells in an attempt to please every overly sensitive, whiny person who's competing to have the hottest take in the room. So that's why it shouldn't be surprising that many young people are right-wing edgelords these days. To a lot of them, being a leftist looks like a miserable chore that isn't fun and lacks any culture of pranks and memes. I know people who have de-radicalized from the right, and that was, for a lot of them, one of their biggest concerns. They really felt like they'd have to give up on memes and jokes just to be a leftist. If people bitched at their reps as much as Karens squawk at retail workers, and if we treated protests with the same fervor and crowds as raves, we'd be changing the world overnight and having a blast doing it. If treating work as play, as Bookchin put it, is already such a popular idea with leftists, then I don't think it'd be a stretch to apply the same to the March of Progress.